John Lennon walked into the Indica bookshop in London on April 1st, 1966, looking for Nietzsche, but found something else that would change music forever. He mispronounced the German philosopher's name so badly that bookshop owner Barry Miles initially had no clue what he wanted. When Miles finally figured it out and handed Lennon the portable Nietzsche, something else caught John's eye. A copy of The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Timothy Leary. Lennon settled into the shop's old settee and immediately found the line that would open one of the Beatles' most revolutionary songs. Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, float downstream.
However, this wasn't Lennon's first encounter with mind-altering substances. A year earlier, in spring 1965, he and George Harrison had been unwitting participants in what might be rock history's most infamous dinner party. Their dentist, John Riley, had invited the couples to his London home for what seemed like an ordinary evening. After dinner, Riley insisted everyone finish their coffee, then casually mentioned he'd laced the sugar cubes with LSD. Lennon was furious, shouting, "How dare you fucking do this to us?" While Harrison was more curious, thinking, "Well, what's that? So what? Let's go." Cynthia Lennon described it as finding themselves in the middle of a horror film, as the room seemed to get bigger and bigger. The group fled Riley's house in Harrison's Mini Cooper, spending the next 8 hours navigating their first psychedelic experience.
When Lennon sat down to write Tomorrow Never Knows in January 1966, he combined his LSD experiences with Leary's book, creating lyrics that were almost entirely lifted from the psychedelic experience. According to biographer Albert Goldman, Lennon even recorded himself reading passages from the book, playing them back during acid trips in a kind of psychedelic self-hypnosis session. The song's working title was originally Mark I, though it eventually got renamed thanks to one of Ringo's famous verbal slip-ups, a malapropism that the band found more intriguing than whatever Ringo had actually meant to say. Interestingly, George Harrison later questioned whether Lennon truly understood the spiritual depth of what he was singing about, noting that the whole point is that we are the song, and that everything else was just clutter.
And the recording process was as revolutionary as the song itself. On April 6, 1966, the Beatles entered Abbey Road Studio 3 with their newly promoted 20-year-old engineer, Geoff Emerick. Lennon wanted his voice to sound like 1,000 Tibetan monks chanting from a mountaintop, leading to the first ever use of a vocal fed through a Leslie speaker cabinet. When the concept was explained, Lennon seriously asked if they could achieve the same effect by hanging him upside down and spinning him around a microphone while he sang. Paul McCartney had spent weeks at home creating tape loops inspired by Karlheinz Stockhausen's Musik concrète techniques, bringing over 30 loops in a plastic bag to the studio. 5 of these loops made it onto the final track, including McCartney's sped-up laughter that sounds like a seagull, orchestral chords, Mellotron sounds, and a heavily saturated sitar phrase. The backwards guitar solo was recorded by McCartney during the same session as Taxman, with the tape simply flipped and played in reverse, a technique that would become a psychedelic music staple.
Tomorrow Never Knows closed the Revolver album as a sonic manifesto for a new era, proving that the Beatles could take an unwanted acid trip, a mispronounced philosophy book, and some experimental studio techniques to create something that sounded like it came from the future.